My sermon was very much focused on the motivations for giving. However, Exodus 35 and 36, I think, also helps us look at the mode of our giving. It's very practical. And I'm going to suggest 4 steps for reviewing your giving, particularly to the local church, because I think that's the most appropriate context for this particular example. Firstly, give from what you have. The Israelites were told, from what you have, take an offering for the Lord in verse 5. You see, you can't give what you haven't got. I know that might sound obvious, but we do need to be realistic and we do need to avoid comparing ourselves to others. What's interesting is you find that every sector of the Israelite society got involved. The men and the women, the wealthy and the less so. And between them they discovered that they had everything they needed. I mean, not everybody had an onyx stone. But, well, if they had, they'd had far too many. But they had something. Some found a piece of coloured thread. Some thought, well, I can use that thread and embroider it into the cloth. It's interesting that, I mean, where did they get all this stuff from? They were ex-slaves after all. Well, it's probably the plunder they took from Egypt as they left. We're told in Exodus chapter 12 that the Lord made the Egyptians favourably disposed towards the Israelites and gave them what they asked for. I mean, you could walk away with whatever cheek you had to ask for, and that included gold and silver. I mean, God had clearly provided everything they had. If you put yourself in their shoes, they would have understood that. But you know, the truth is that God has given us all that we have. It's the same. Even though at times it doesn't always feel like that. We can feel, particularly in our capitalist system, that we've earned what we have. We've deserved those wages, and our skill has warranted those possessions. But actually, that's not actually the full truth. God has provided everything you have, and you didn't deserve any of it. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, so says Psalm 24. And for some of us, we need to rediscover that truth, get that perspective before we move on. Secondly, be considered. We are told that the Israelite community withdrew from Moses' presence. Why? Because they considered what they were going to give. They talked about it. They weighed it up. They assessed what they had. I think a good thing of being considered is to ask God, Holy Spirit, what do you want me to give, and to whom? If you're married, it's good to ask one another, what shall we give? To consider together and be deliberate in what you decide. Thirdly, think about your treasure, yes, but also your talent and your time. It's interesting that the Israelites gave all 3. I love this verse 26. We're told that all the women who were willing and had the skill spun goat hair. Well, you needed goat hair. You needed to be quite skilled, I imagine, to make anything of it, and you needed time to use those skills. Now, we're not all being asked to build a tent anymore, but all those 3 things are still needed to see God's dwelling place, the church, established in more and more places and increased through more life groups and venues and church plants and ministries to the poor and reaching other nations. Therefore, when you review your giving, think about those 3 things. And at different times, different ones of us will be able to give more of one or the other. But to get a holistic mix of treasure and talent and time is a good way of looking at things. Fourthly, continue to give. We're told in verse 3 of chapter 36, the people continue to bring free will offerings morning after morning. It's just a reminder that generosity is a lifestyle, not a one-hit wonder. If you've got bank accounts, then setting up standing orders or pay as or give as you earn, rather, can be really helpful. But don't just leave it to the automated kind of formula. Do also engage with God and respond to specific needs at specific times. But either way, the New Testament advocates this long view of our generous giving. When Paul wrote to the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians 16, he said, on the first day of every week, in other words, on a Sunday, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. You've already made a plan. Every week you're putting something aside. So whether it's through bank accounts or through some other way, it's taking a long view of our giving. That should be encouraged. So there you go. There's 4 things to take away. Give from what you have. Be considered. Think about your talent and your time as well as your treasure. And keep going with this adventure and grace of giving.